Hello and welcome. I'm Sima Katauka and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. Russian President Vladimir Putin states during his meeting with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi that Russia is ready to provide uninterrupted fuel supplies for India. Putin has also added that many agreements aimed at strengthening Russia-India cooperation were signed during the talks. The United States tells European diplomats that it expects Europe to assume the majority of NATO's defense capabilities by 2027, warning that Washington may scale back participation in key coordination frameworks if the deadline is not met. Hezbollah chief Naim Qassem says the group supports the Lebanese government's diplomatic efforts to end Israeli attacks and uphold the existing ceasefire, though he has criticized the inclusion of a civilian representative in the monitoring committee. Heavy rains has triggered fresh landslides warning in Sri Lanka's worst affected central hills as the death toll rises from last week's cyclone Ditwa has now jumped to 607 people. Germany's foreign minister says the country does not need outside advice after US President Donald Trump's administration has released a new strategy document that strongly criticizes allies in Europe. Japan expresses concerns after reports that China deployed an unusually large number of naval and Coast Guard vessels across East Asian waters. China has positioned more than 100 ships at one point, marking its biggest maritime show of force so far. FIFA will introduce a new annual award, FIFA Peace Prize Football Unites the World, with US President Donald Trump among the contenders during the 2026 World Cup draw in Washington, D.C. next year. US President Donald Trump hosted Rwanda's Paul Kagame and DRC's Felix Tshisekedi in Washington to sign a peace agreement aimed at ending conflict in the region. Trump has called the deal a great miracle, though clashes continue on the ground. Now we start this hour with the United States. The United States has told European diplomats that it expects Europe to take over the majority of NATO's defense capabilities by 2027. The shift would dramatically alter the alliance's long-standing structure, with Europe assuming greater responsibility for intelligence, missile defense, and broader operational commitments. US officials warned that if Europe fails to meet the 2027 target, Washington may scale back participation in certain NATO coordination frameworks. Some European officials argue the timeline is unrealistic, noting slow progress in strengthening defense industries and readiness. The pressure follows NATO's June summit in The Hague, where leaders endorse US-backed spending targets, which is 5% of their GDP on defense, with a minimum 3.5% by 2035 and up to 1.5% dedicated to infrastructure protection, resilience, innovation, as well as industrial capacity. The US insists Europe must rapidly scale up to ensure NATO's long-term viability and reduce reliance on American capabilities. Now for this discussion, we welcome Mr. Peter Cardillo. He's a chief market economist at Spartan Capital Securities, joins us live from New York. Thank you very much, Mr. Peter, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, looking at this, how feasible is the US expectation that Europe must assume the bulk of NATO's defense capabilities by 2027?
Well, I think, it's feasible. It's something that means that they would have to, perk up their defense and spend more money on defense. And so that, in a way, diminishes the U.S. from having to spend more on defense in terms of NATO. So I kind of think it's possible. It's something that the administration wants, and I think that it's actually good news in terms of actually accelerating economic growth in Europe, because that means they're going to have to spend more on defense and less on social programs.
And what do you think, what political consequences might emerge if Washington follows through on scaling back participation if NATO doesn't increase their defense capabilities?
Well, if they don't, then I think, I'm not sure, I'm not a political analyst, but my own opinion on this would be that President Trump would probably get tougher and more lean when it comes to Europe. And so from that perspective, I think that it opens up an avenue of negotiations.
And how do you think, how will this new NATO spending target reshape internal dynamics within NATO?
Well, again, one of the big things that this administration did in this previous administration, and now also under this previous administration, in the first administration, and now in this administration, is that they have asked Europe to increase their share of financial fundings to NATO. And so I would suspect that there could be a good possibility that, as I said before, President Trump would get very lean and perhaps maybe threaten to pull out. I don't think that'll happen, but I guess that would be one way, a tactic that he could use.
Right. And what do you think what will happen, or how do you think this will affect internal dynamics for the countries struggling to meet even the current defense commitments?
Well, as I said before, I think is it going to work out just the way the United States wants it to work out? I don't think so. Will they open up an avenue of negotiations where they can arrive at some sort of happy medium? And I would guess that that's probably what's going to happen. The U.S. bears the brunt of that, so there is room for Europe to basically to negotiate. And as I said before, in a certain respect, it's going to be positive, because that means they'd have to spend more on defense. That means their economies could grow and less on social programs.
Right. With that, I would like to thank Mr. Peter Cardillo for joining us as a Chief Market Economist at Spartan Capital Securities, joining us live from New York. Thank you very much. Now we move the focus to Middle East. Hezbollah's chief Naim Qassem has said that the group supports the Lebanese government's use of diplomacy to end Israeli attacks and implement the existing ceasefire agreement. Qassem has called the state's diplomatic efforts necessary and said that Hezbollah will continue to back them. However, he has criticized the decision to include a civilian representative in the ceasefire monitoring committee, describing it as a misstep. This comment follows the first direct meeting between Lebanese and Israeli civilian representatives in decades, which was held on 3rd November under the year-old ceasefire monitoring mechanism. Lebanon's president said the meeting aims to prevent a resurgence of war and maintain stability along the border. Qassem's statement highlights Hezbollah's support for diplomatic solutions while maintaining scrutiny over decisions it sees as politically or strategically flawed. Now for this discussion, we welcome Mr. Adrian Calamel. He's a terrorism scholar, joins us live from New York. Thank you very much, Mr. Adrian, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now looking at this, how does Hezbollah's conditional support for state-led diplomacy reflect the group's broader strategy of balancing political legitimacy with its militant leverage?
Uh, Good evening,
Good
Asuma.
evening.
Good to see you again.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for having me on the show. Good evening to all your viewers.
Thank you.
This is very interesting if you read these statements because this is a time when the Lebanese state is supposed to be disarming Hezbollah, and Naim Qassem's come out very strongly against Aoun on this, where it's, very, very strong words. That's where we are, where the United States is pressuring the Lebanese, president to disarm Hezbollah, and then now Hezbollah with Naim Qassem's talking about a diplomatic solution in Israel, talking with the Lebanese state. Uh, you would have never seen this in the past had if we had not gone through what was kind of the dismantling of Hezbollah or large segments of Hezbollah. I think it shows a relative place of weakness of the organization that Naim Qassem would say, this type of meeting would have never happened before in the past, and this is kind of where we are after 2 years of warfare in the region that was kind of sometimes a sideshow, but really one of the main theaters was the Lebanon-Israel War of the North, as they would call it in Israel, and what happened there. So Naim Qassem obviously doesn't want independent monitors there because what Hezbollah has done is they've created a parallel state. They've created a state next to the state where the Lebanese state can't fulfill certain services. Hezbollah fulfills those services. So he wants to keep those institutions, parallel state, intact, and not to show that they've kind of bent over to the Lebanese government, I would say, and especially Israel.
Yes, and thank you for laying it out there. And Mr. Adrian, now what does Hezbollah's objection to this particular civilian participation in the ceasefire monitoring committee reveal about its approach to power sharing and conflict management?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Thank you.
And that should really highlight what Hezbollah is. People like to separate the political from the military wing, civilian from, what they want to control the situation. They don't want any outside meddling. Even when you have groups like, let's say, UNIFIL, which is supposed to have been monitoring the UN Resolution 1701 about disarming south of Litani. If you look at that, that's an outside independent organization. And if you had seen outposts before the war kicked off, you would see UNIFIL outposts and then two Hezbollah command centers or rocket stations right next to the UNIFIL headquarters or forward operating posts or whatever you would want to monitoring positions. So they have they're in a place right now where they're much weaker, as I said before. But even then, I don't know if groups like LAF, the UNIFIL organizations have the capacity, and two, do they have the political will to disarm Hezbollah? And I think Naim Qassem is also concerned that if it bring in an independent observer or a civilian, that's going to be someone that's not aligned with Hezbollah, that's going to it's going to muddy the waters for Hezbollah. What they're looking for is basically a tactical retreat for keeping their strategic long-term objectives, and that is to maintain and hold power and be more powerful than the Lebanese state itself.
Yes, and Adrian, I also wanted to ask you, how common is this role of non-combatant actors in security processes, like in this case, civilian participation in the ceasefire monitoring committee?
Oh, that's a good question. I assume I'm
Yes.
gonna have to, as we say in America, punt on that one because I'm trying
No
to think
worries.
of
Yes.
situations where civilians have been put in to kind of
Yes.
monitor
Yes.
peace situations.
Yes.
It's tough. That's a great question, but one that I'm going to be thinking about all night.
No worries, you can get back to me another time. And now that we were talking about Hezbollah disarming as pressure rises on them to disarm, but of course it is stronger than the Lebanese army itself. So when, in case, let's supposedly say that they do dismantle their organization, this Hezbollah, so where do these people go to? Like, how are they going to be de-radicalized, if I must say?
Yeah, that's a great question, and
Thank
it
you.
just falls back on they can't be de-radicalized. You have to get them at a much younger age. This is something, the radicalization process that really happens. It starts at the age of 4, 5, 6. This radicalization process, and Hezbollah. Just as Hamas, and this is where the peace plan is going to kind of fall flat, I think, in Gaza, is that they're never going to relinquish power. They're not going to give up their weapons. Hezbollah has on numerous occasions supposed to give up their weapons. They haven't. In 1989, to end the civil war, one of the things to end the civil war was there's so many militias running around the country. There are over 50 militias running around the country. Hezbollah being the most powerful of those militias, and every militia had to disarm except for Hezbollah. And Hezbollah was able to maintain their weapons from the Taif Accord. So, and they've just grown from there, and they're just not going to give up their weapons. I can't see it happen. If they were going to go places, the clear places would be the Islamic Republic of Iran, where they're closely aligned. They also have a very large diaspora in Latin America and the tri-border area, Brazil, Argentina, Paraguay, where all those countries meet. There's places where they could obviously disperse to, but I don't see Hezbollah being displaced in Lebanon. When it comes down to the reality of the situation, I just can't see it happening.
Right. With that, I would like to thank Mr. Adrian Calamel for sharing that. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now, moving on to Iran, Iran's Revolutionary Guards Navy has fired ballistic and cruise missiles at simulated targets in the Gulf during a 2-day military drill aimed at countering foreign threats. The exercises included large-scale launches of Qadr 110, Qadr 380, and Qadr 360 cruise missiles, as well as 303 ballistic missiles, with drones striking simulated enemy bases in the Gulf of Oman. The drills began in the strategic Strait of Hormuz and emphasized Iran's growing use of AI-enabled systems and the resistance of its naval forces. The show of force comes months after a 12-day Israel-Iran air war in June this year, during which the U.S. joined Israel in hitting Iran's nuclear facilities. Separately, Iran has hosted an anti-terrorism exercise with Shanghai Cooperation Organization members in East Azerbaijan province, signaling both cooperation with neighbors and deterrence against adversaries. The SCO drills featured participation from Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Oman, and Azerbaijan, reflecting broader security coordination across the bloc. Now for this discussion, we welcome back Mr. Adrian Calamel. He's a terrorism scholar, joins us live from New York. Thank you very much, Mr. Adrian, for staying with us. Now, what are we to make of this, this recent Iran's large-scale missile and drone drills, and also the cooperation with, unlike countries such as Saudi Arabia and other neighbors who, in history, if we look back, they don't share good relations with Iran?
Yeah, those are two really good questions. The
Thank
first one about the ballistic missiles, the drones, you have to take a look at what they're firing and where it's taking place. So where it's taking place is Strait of Hormuz, and whenever the Islamic Republic wants to saber rattle, they will do things along the Strait of Hormuz, because if you cut that off, that cuts off a good part of the world's global oil supply. They've never been able to do so. I don't think they would do it. If they did, it could be lifted easily. But that's neither here nor there. The more important issue, I think, is to show, and you brought in China into this conversation, is to show that the Islamic Republic is rebuilding their ballistic missile capabilities, their drone capabilities. A lot of these were taken offline. Depots destroyed. A lot of the fuel necessary to power the ballistic missiles. That's a lot of what was diminished during the 12-day war. And so what we've seen is China they have been shipping that fuel to the Islamic Republic to power those ballistic missiles. So it's the Islamic Republic of Iran showing that this is what we have. We've built it back up. If Israel attempts another round, because Asuma, we have to understand
Yes.
that this did not terminate the regime's nuclear program. It just set it back, and it set it back roughly 2 years by the best estimates, I would say. So
Yes.
people that look at this closely are trying to say, when is another round coming to hit? One, stockpiles that weren't hit. Two, other facilities that weren't damaged to completely. So I think the Islamic Republic is saying, well, we know that that's their objective. They want a nuclear weapon. Israel knows they want that. They're trying to build up their ballistic missiles to confront what would be an Israeli attack. And it's basically a show of strength and saying, you're going to get more of these ballistic missiles flying into civilian populations if you try to go after our nuclear capabilities again.
Yes, and how do you think?
Oh, Saudi Arabia.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
You asked a question about Saudi Arabia, partners in the region that
Yes.
they traditionally wouldn't work with. Countries like this get very nervous. The Saudis are just trying to hedge their bets. I'll keep it very short. They're just kind of sitting on the fence. They would really like to peel away from the Islamic Republic because they know the end of times, if it was the Islamic Republic versus Saudi Arabia, one of the objectives of the Islamic Republic is not just the destruction of Israel and destruction of America, but it's to control Saudi Arabia and the two holiest sites in Mecca and Medina. So and the Saudis know that as well. So they're in a dangerous neighborhood, and they just gotta play it carefully.
Right. And how is West eyeing all these increasing cooperation with the SCO and also Iran's large-scale this drills, expanding AI-enabled capabilities?
I think there's always going to be a level of skepticism when it comes to the Islamic Republic and those type of capabilities. They will flaunt them. They will say they have them, such as hypersonic missiles. They've claimed they've have them. They claim they shot them during the 12-day war. Those weren't true hypersonic missiles. They recently had an AI humanoid convention, and it was actually very weird and bizarre, where they had actual actors dressed up as robots to make it look like and they were making robotic moves to make it look like they had really captured this AI robotics. I just can't see that. They just have a problem of making that technological leap. If they do make it, it's going to be with the assistance of China. I think that's one of the countries. When you look at the AI race, it's U.S., China that are very advanced, and everything coming out of the Islamic Republic is very crude in that respect. I mean, they have problems with. That's one of the problems with their hypersonic missiles, and not true hypersonic is. Once they come back in the atmosphere, they lose their guidance. They don't have a guidance system. So they just come plunging into a civilian population. So the technology just isn't there.
And lastly, Mr. Adrian, do you think, it's so interesting that you mentioned about this AI faking AI or capabilities, or the robotics that you mentioned. Do you think Russia can help Iran have gained momentum in AI capabilities, or in any of these, including air defense?
Yeah, I think Russia can to a degree. except air defense, their S-400s have proven to be not useful. Well, the S-300s that they've been supplying and the S-400s. I mean, we have to remember that the air defense systems that protected like Natanz, they've been taken out multiple times before the 12-day war. So they've been proven deemed to be ineffective. And Moscow is really, Putin's really tied up in multiple situations here where he's kind of dealing with the manpower issue, he's dealing with the firepower issue. They are definitely making a drive towards AI, but I think any type of support between Russia and the Islamic Republic of Iran is coming when not in the those type of fields. It's just basic drones, ballistic missiles, those type of transfers. I think the Chinese are the ones that really are kind of leading the AI part. Russia's doing well in this. They're very great at employing, what would you say, on the battlefield, different types of deep fakes with communications that we are not as good at. They're very good at using different different types of, it's not true AI, but bringing type of elements to the battlefield that are not, shooting down range, but are bringing electronics warfare to the battlefield. They're very good at that, but that doesn't help countries such as the Islamic Republic, because what they have to worry about is an aerial campaign, and they are defenseless against an aerial campaign. All they can do is lash out with ballistic missiles and drones, which brings us back to the beginning of our conversation.
Yes, indeed. With that, I would like to thank Mr. Adrian Calamel for joining us today as a terrorism scholar from New York. Thank you very much. Now we move on to Sri Lanka. Heavy rains has triggered fresh landslides warnings in Sri Lanka's worst affected Central Hills as the death toll rises from last week's cyclone Ditwa now has jumped to 607 people. The National Building Research Organization has said that since the rainfall within the past 24 hours has exceeded 150 millimeters, and if the rain continues, then evacuation of people to safe locations will begin to avoid the risk of landslides. Meanwhile, the International Monetary Fund has said that Sri Lanka has requested for financial assistance for about $200 million to address the destruction caused by Cyclone Ditwa. IMF chief for Sri Lanka, Ivan Papageorgiou, has said that the IMF remains closely engaged with Sri Lankan authorities during this challenging period and is committed to supporting the country as it undertakes urgent efforts to recover, rebuild, and promote resilience for the future. Now we move on to our next news. The official draw for the World Cup is taking place in Washington, D.C.'s Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts. All eyes will be on FIFA President Gianni Infantino following the announcement of a new Peace Prize by U.S. President Donald Trump to be awarded by football's governing body on an annual basis. A special focus will also be on countries like Iran and Haiti, whose representatives have already been denied entry into the United States for official FIFA events, even as their football teams have been qualified for football's most prestigious tournament. The U.S. president was all praise for the FIFA chief at a press briefing ahead of the draw. Let's listen in.
Thank you very much. And I just want to introduce a friend of mine who I just noticed in the audience. He's in charge of a very small sport called here soccer, over there football. So nobody knows really what to call it. Johnny, thank you very much. The head of FIFA is here. I can report to you that we have sold more tickets than any country anywhere in the world at this stage of the game, and I think we probably broke all records before you even get close. And you have a big event on Friday at the Trump Kennedy Center. Oh, excuse me, at the Kennedy Center. Pardon me, I've such a terrible mistake, Marco. At the Kennedy Center, and I look forward to seeing you there. But I want to congratulate you. No, it's really taken the world by storm. You've never done anything like what's happening in terms of ticket sales. I'm making a lot of enemies telling people, I'm sorry, I can't get you tickets. I just can't do it. But congratulations. You've done a fantastic job. A great leader in sports and a great gentleman. Thank you very much, Johnny.
That's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.